Hello again. Welcome back to year 4 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is week 52, our last week, day 1. So, last time we began reading from 1st Maccabees. We saw the summary of the history of Jerusalem and the surrounding area during the first century or so, the first 130 some years of Hellenistic rule, and we saw the intense persecutions that came upon them during the reign of the Seleucid king Antiochus Epiphanes. He had taken Jerusalem and installed a garrison in the fortress there, and he had desecrated the temple, established a pagan altar for sacrifice on the altar of burnt offering, and he placed pagan idols in the temple itself. He was requiring pagan sacrifice from all the Jews, and a great many people were either compromising and accepting this worship or being punished with death if they refused. Some others fled into the wilderness, living as outlaws until they were caught. Into this situation, we have the introduction of the family of a certain Levite named Mattathias. This is chapter 2 of 1st Maccabees. In those days, Mattathias, son of John, son of Simeon, a priest of the family of Joarib, moved from Jerusalem and settled in Modane. He had 5 sons, John, Simon, Judas Maccabeus, Eleazar, and Jonathan. He saw the blasphemies being committed in Judah and Jerusalem, and said, Alas, why was I born to see this, the ruin of my people, the ruin of the holy city, and to live there when it was given over to the enemy, the sanctuary given over to aliens? Then Mattathias and his sons tore their clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned greatly. The king's officers who were enforcing the apostasy came to the town of Modane to make them offer sacrifice. Many from Israel came to them, and Mattathias and his sons were assembled. Then the king's officers spoke to Mattathias as follows: You are a leader, honored and great in this town, and supported by sons and brothers. Now be the first to come, and do what the king commands, as all the Gentiles and the people of Judah, and those that are left in Jerusalem have done. Then you and your sons will be numbered among the friends of the king, and you and your sons will be honored with silver and gold and many gifts. But Mattathias answered and said in a loud voice, Even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him, and have chosen to obey his commandments, every one of them abandoning the religion of their ancestors, I and my sons and my brothers will continue to live by the covenant of our ancestors. Far be it from us to desert the law and the ordinances. We will not obey the king's words by turning aside from our religion to the right hand or to the left. When he had finished speaking these words, a Jew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifice on the altar in Modane, according to the king's command. When Mattathias saw it, he burned with zeal, and his heart was stirred. He gave vent to righteous anger. He ran and killed him on the altar. At the same time he killed the king's officer who was forcing them to sacrifice, and he tore down the altar. Thus he burned with zeal for the law, just as Phinehas did against Zimri, son of Salu. Then Mattathias cried out in the town with a loud voice, saying, Let everyone who is zealous for the law and supports the covenant come out with me. Then he and his sons fled to the hills, and left all that they had in the town. At that time many who were seeking righteousness and justice went down to the wilderness to live there, they, their sons, their wives, and their livestock, because troubles pressed heavily upon them. And it was reported to the king's officers, and to the troops in Jerusalem, the city of David, that those who had rejected the king's command had gone down to the hiding places in the wilderness. Many pursued them and overtook them. They encamped opposite them and prepared for battle against them on the Sabbath day. They said to them, Enough of this! Come out and do what the king commands, and you will live. But they said, We will not come out, nor will we do what the king commands, and so profane the Sabbath day. Then the enemy quickly attacked them. But they did not answer them, or hurl a stone at them, or block up their hiding places, for they said, Let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth testify for us that you are killing us unjustly. So they attacked them on the Sabbath, and they died, with their wives and children and livestock, to the number of 1,000 persons. When Mattathias and his friends learned of it, they mourned for them deeply, and all said to their neighbors, If we all do as our kindred have done, and refuse to fight with the Gentiles for our lives and for our ordinances, they will quickly destroy us from the earth. So they made this decision that day. Let us fight against anyone who comes to attack us on the Sabbath day. Let us not all die as our kindred died in their hiding places. Then there united with them a company of Hasidians, mighty warriors of Israel, all who offered themselves willingly for the law. And all who became fugitives to escape their troubles joined them and reinforced them. They organized an army and struck down sinners in their anger and renegades in their wrath. The survivors fled to the Gentiles for safety. And Mattathias and his friends went around and tore down the altars. They forcibly circumcised all the uncircumcised boys that they found within the borders of Israel. They hunted down the arrogant, and the work prospered in their hands. They rescued the law out of the hands of the Gentiles and kings, and they never let the sinner gain the upper hand. And then we'll sum up the next several verses as Mattathias comes to his deathbed and leaves the war effort in the hands of his son Judas Maccabees. On his deathbed, he reminded his sons of all the heroes of the past, of Abraham and Phinehas and Caleb and David and Elijah and the three youths and Daniel, and he urged them as follows, picking up with verse 61. And so observe from generation to generation that none of those who put their trust in him will lack strength. Do not fear the words of sinners, for their splendor will turn into dung and worms. Today they will be exalted, but tomorrow they will not be found, because they will have returned to the dust, and their plans will have perished. My children, be courageous and grow strong in the law, for by it you will gain honor. Here is your brother Simeon, who I know is wise in counsel. Always listen to him. He shall be your father. Judas Maccabeus has been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you and fight the battle against the peoples. You shall rally around you all who observe the law and avenge the wrong done to your people. Pay back the Gentiles in full and obey the commands of the law. And then we're going to sum up the rest of what happens. Under Judas's leadership, they won a number of victories, and eventually they won a great victory that drove out the Greeks from their region at the Battle of Emmaus. That's important. After this victory, they went and cleansed and rededicated the temple, and this is the origin of the Feast of Hanukkah. And then they made war against their enemies all around, regaining independent control of most of the territory of the old kingdom of Judah. Judas eventually died in battle when he overreached. Most of his army ran away when they found themselves outnumbered, and in the aftermath of his death, his brother Jonathan took up the kingship of Judea, and he took up the high priesthood as well. And then he made alliances with Sparta and with Rome. This alliance with Rome was actually the legal excuse for Rome's sovereignty over Judea at the time of Christ. And that basically brings us to the end of the story. So here's the question. Who are the good guys? Are they Mattathias and his sons? Because if we look at what Mattathias and his sons did, let's see. They were determined not to do what the king had said. And therefore, who's the first person that they killed? They killed a faithless son of Abraham, who was coming to offer on the altar. There's precedent for that. Phinehas does something like that. And we reference this. Phinehas is the one who found the son of Israel consorting, that's a euphemism, with one of the prostitutes of Baal, and he went into the tent and speared them both to remove the stain from Israel, and therefore God blessed his zeal. Is this the same thing? Maybe. Then what did they do? Well, now they've done violence, and having done violence against the king is looking for the people who are refusing him, and he finds this group that are not associated with Mattathias. They've left their towns, they've gone into the wilderness to live in peace, and the king sends his army against them on the Sabbath day, and all those people refuse to fight on the Sabbath day, refuse to dishonor the Sabbath. They refuse to do what the king says, so they all accept death. They are martyred, right? Then what does Mattathias do? He says, they might come against us on the Sabbath day. Well, I guess we can't obey the Sabbath day anymore. Let's fight for the law on any day that they come against us. So let's be clear. They are offering themselves willingly for the law, except for the law of the Sabbath. Now, what are they going to do? Are they going, with this army that they've raised, are they going to go and fight against the Greeks? against the army that is here persecuting them? No. They're going and killing anyone who has renounced the law. They're forcibly circumcising the boys that they find, but they're not they're not going against the enemies of Israel. They are going against people who have, in weakness, yes, but nonetheless, they're going against the weak. They're fighting in their strength of numbers against the weak, not against the strong. So who's the good guys here? And then Mattathias dies. Judas continues. They win battles. They rededicate the temple. God doesn't come back to them, which indicates maybe he's not happy with what they've been doing. And then, after they die, they make alliances with strong nations overseas, with Sparta and with Rome. Is this the right thing to do? Is this how the people of God are called to trust him, by making alliances with other peoples? If we pay attention to this story, we might not recognize it right away, because it seems like, hey, Mattathias is being faithful. Judas Maccabeus is the good guy. But in fact, they are doing many things that are expressly forbidden in the law that they are purporting to uphold. This is a problem. This is a deep problem. This is not good. And really, from what they're doing, we see the seeds of the three groups that are causing trouble for Jesus. On the one hand, we see the roots of the Pharisees. They are forcing people to follow the law and purifying the temple so that God can return, but also they're making excuses to make it livable for themselves. Right? So that's kind of the Pharisee thing. We see the origins of the Sadducees. We see all the people who are collaborating with the Hellenistic way of life and gaining power, but the Sadducees are basically the ones who are inheriting the high priesthood, which was seized by not the house of the high priest, but the house of Judas Maccabeus, who's a Levite, but not supposed to be the high priest, but now he's taken it by force. And the Sadducees are the ones who hold the high priesthood at the time of Christ, and they make a lot of money off of it, right? So they've been corrupted that way. And then we see the Zealots, the third group, the ones who just want to kill the Romans, but if they can't do that, kill everyone who's associated with the Romans. And it seems like maybe Judas Iscariot might be one of those. These are the people who want to see Jesus raise a revolution and drive the Romans out by force of arms. And Jesus has been showing us in everything he says to the disciples at the mystical supper that he is going a different way. And as though to make this point explicitly clear, we have the fascinating little scene at the end of the book of Luke, which we read a couple years ago, where Jesus walks along the road with the two disciples as they're going to Emmaus. Why do they mention the town? They could just say a certain town. They mention Emmaus for a reason, because Jesus isn't stopping in Emmaus. He's going further. The disciples beg him to stay over in Emmaus, and he agrees to go in and eat with them. He breaks the bread, he reveals himself to them, and he vanishes from their sight, because Jesus is not staying put in Emmaus. He is not coming just to drive out the earthly enemies. He's coming to deliver us from sin and death and demons and lead us into repentance and glory forever. So, all of this, there's a lot more that could be said about First Maccabees. We honor the martyrs who were faithful and went to their death trusting in the Lord. They're celebrated in the church. Actually, they were celebrated just a couple days ago on August 1st, if I'm not misremembering. But anyway, for now, that's the end of day 1 here. God bless you all. We'll see you shortly for day 2.